Hey, Larry, good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon, Chad. Doing great. Good to be
Terrific.
back with you.
Yes, sir, absolutely. So we talked recently about this segment today and talking about something called the three Ps today. And I'll admit I am not familiar with this at all, so I'm going to ask you to enlighten us on what it is.
You're going to love it then. I'll get into what the three Ps are in just a moment. But just to preamble that, what you're going to love about this is whether or not you're applying it to yourself or you're using it as a coach with a client,
Okay.
right? It's all about building perspective.
Okay. So let's just start with, hey, what are the three Ps?
Yeah. Okay. Good is a good place to start, right? So
Yeah, right.
the three Ps are referring to, get ready,
Yeah.
personal, pervasive, and permanent. So
Okay.
essentially, it's how we explain to ourselves in our own minds what's happening in our world. So it was made popular or famous, if you want to call it that, by Marty
Sure.
Seligman, former APA president back in 2000, positive psychology godfather. And he refers to this as our explanatory styles.
Okay.
So the three Ps are associated essentially with our emotional reactions that we have when we experience some degree of adversity, right, or a
Okay.
challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So when we think of events that are happening to us, right, uh, and they're personal, we think that it's just because of us, right? That's kind of the personal in the three P,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
We also believe that the event or the experience will dictate the outcome of our entire day, right?
Yeah.
But we also believe we take it a step further and then extrapolate and believe that it's going to define our entire life. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like this exercise of this pessimistic viewpoint, or more pessimistic than optimistic. And in some extreme cases, it even enters this realm of what we call catastrophizing, where just everything is going wrong
Yeah.
all the time.
Okay. So catastrophizing. So give us an example. What does it look like in action?
Yeah, I always use this very maybe oversimplified example because it I think it resonates.
Sure.
So, for
Sure.
example,
Okay.
ready? This is what I use. So, I missed the train and now I'm late for work.
Okay.
Why does this always happen to me? The personal.
Okay.
Now my entire day is a disaster. They're pervasive. This is my life. It's always going to be this way. The permanent.
Okay. Yeah. I've been there. I can relate to that, right? I mean, we have some of those days in the coaching world or all that, some catabolic energy where nothing good's
Yes.
going to happen and nothing good's going to come of my day. And woe is me, right? The Eeyore syndrome. So,
Yes.
yeah, when we're not at our best, it really can feel that way. So kind of enlighten us a little bit on how this all works.
Well, yeah, and I think it's important to point out at this point that we have to remember, and you know this, that our
Mhm.
brains are wired for
Yes.
negativity.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
negativity bias. It's the way we are kind of wired.
Right.
So we literally have to reshape or relay new neural pathways and start thinking differently on how we interact with the world and our experiences. And that really translates to seeing things through a more optimistic lens. So
Okay. Hmm.
in this way, when we encounter adversity at any magnitude, we're responding more and reacting less.
Okay.
All
So
right.
yeah, it really does come down to a mind shift, a mindset, a change in
It does.
mindset.
It
Yeah,
does. And I would even suggest that this is where we haven't talked about this yet in any of our segments, but this is where mindfulness comes in, right? Because
sure.
it's about creating a space. Stephen Covey used to talk about this
Yeah.
from, the gap between our ability to respond and an interaction. It's basically stimulus or response, but like, how do we create a space between an experience and your reaction? And or response to it. And in doing so over time, we talk about reps all the time in these
Yeah.
segments, that
Hmm.
it becomes more natural.
Sure.
So when we start to do that, we build these optimism muscles. So again, it's this idea of creating this space so that we can respond versus react. The more we do that, the more optimistic viewpoint or vantage point we take around those experiences, and the less we catastrophize, and we're able to invert our 3P model and think about things.
That makes sense. So I guess then kind of help us, or what is the counter to this pessimistic, personal, pervasive, and permanent, that's a lot of P's,
Yeah,
viewpoint,
just three.
right? Right.
So yeah, and the truth of it is, it's overly simplistic, almost to the degree that we wonder why we have to think this way. But we set the events that we're experiencing are usually more external in nature than we think, and they're not happening to us because of us. So that's
Not
the
about us.
personal,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Number two, we apply a narrower aperture or lens around the magnitude of the experience, and we recognize that these less favorable events or experiences are more often one-offs than defining everything in a day, right?
Sure.
And that's the pervasive.
Yep.
And then the number three and the last is to remind ourselves that most of these events, no matter how really truly bad they feel when we're experiencing them, is they are more temporary than not, and they will not last forever,
Yeah.
i.e. the permanent.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Simple. But you said it, difficult at the same time. Really a challenge to shift that mindset to those thought processes.
Right. Yeah. There's one thing before we end the segment, Chad, that I just want to add to this because it's really worth underscoring this. I am not suggesting, nor is the inverted model of the 3Ps suggesting that we are deluding ourselves or that we're unrealistic, some degree of cognitive distortion, and we're just being unrealistic about our perspective. But it really is about taking the time to kind of elevate and adjust our worldview sights, is what I'd like to call it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think for leaders, this is a great way to kind of think about when things don't go according to plan, or you've got an issue that you've got to deal with as a leader. It's not necessarily about you. It could be about somebody else, about the person you're dealing with. This is a one-off for that situation, and it's not going to last forever. So hey, I think that's great. I think for leaders, making sure they understand those 3Ps and how to shift that mindset a little bit could be really powerful in engaging themselves and engaging their peers. So with that, we'll jump off. Again, we try to use these as little short tidbits, less than 10 minutes if we can, although we like to talk a little bit. So I'd encourage you to check back often. If you like what you hear, you like what you see, share it, like it, repost it, help those around you shift their mindset as well. And remember to always lead in, leaders.
Thanks, Shed.